Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our first professional development webinar given in this new year. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Debra R. Cohen of the David A. Clarke School of Law to present today's webinar topic entitled Unlearning, the Hardest Part of Learning. Without further ado, Professor Cohen, take it away.
Okay. So welcome those who are joining us. I'm really thrilled that we have at least a couple people who want to talk about this. Feel free to interrupt. I volunteered to do this because I was hoping to create more of a community at UDC talking about teaching and learning. But I want to start with a little bit of a different introduction because it sort of plays into what's going on. So I've been here at UDC for about 11 years. And I've been a teacher for much longer than that. In fact, I'm from this family of half lawyers and half teachers. And I'm the middle of three sisters. And so I split the baby and I'm a law professor. Now, unlike so many other disciplines, when you become a law professor, all you have is a law degree. There is no special training. There is no special, you're not even necessarily a TA in law school before you become a law professor. So a lot of law professors really just mimic what their law professors did. In fact, when I started teaching, my law professor, I asked, well, what do you do? And someone said, well, you find your favorite female law professor and you mimic her. And I looked at the person and said, I'm really old. We didn't have female law professors. And then they said, well, so I went to the person who got me into this and he said, well, just remember you're the quarterback. I'm like, great, football analogies. So I've been on my own quest about teaching and learning. My goal is the success of my students. And it has been a journey. So my name is Deb, and my husband actually calls me Deb Quixote. So I have been on this quest to find out how to help my students learn better. Now, as we all know, particularly here at UDC, there are lots of barriers to learning. But the two that have continually popped up as the real I can't get anywhere until I get over our fear, which Anita and I were just sort of talking about, which triggers all of our anxieties, and prior knowledge. And so today, I'm going to sort of focus on the prior knowledge. The fear is an amazing one, and it's a topic for another day. Someone wants to spearhead that or hold a round table about that, I'm in. So, I'm going to talk about this from the concept of law school because that's my perspective, but it's totally transferable. So, no one comes to law school with a clean slate. It just doesn't happen, right? We all, I'm getting old, right? I can't say that anymore. No one comes with a clean disk or no one comes as a blank USB. It's really hard when you can't hear reaction of people. If anyone wants to unmute so I hear some feedback. Anyway, so no one comes with a blank slate. We all come to everything with our own prior knowledge. Okay. And so we have to think about this. I was first introduced to this concept when I read the book, How Learning Works. And since then, I've taken off on it. This is a really worthwhile reading. Chapter 1 is what hooked me. But we all come with our own facts and figures and knowledge and assumptions and notions and beliefs and ideas. And we all come with all of this. And law school's no different. None of your disciplines are any different. And we all sit in the same classroom and we all hear the same presentations and we all see the same PowerPoint and read the same material, hopefully, though everyone sees it through their own lens. They all perceive the information based on all of those facts and figures and assumptions and belief. And so the prior knowledge people bring to our classrooms is of the utmost importance. And I know I don't have to tell most of you that we are learning more and more about how learning works. And they've discovered this concept of, when I was young and taught, they didn't think of law as constructed. They thought of law as sort of a repetitive, dogmatic, you memorized it, you learned it. They could bang it into our heads if they tried hard enough. But over time, they've come to realize that learning is a very individual process, that we construct our knowledge based on knowledge already there. And so we try to slot it in to our existing frameworks. And so we have this issue of prior knowledge. And if prior knowledge is appropriate and accurate, it is going to help your learning. But if it's either inappropriate for the new subject matter or the new setting, or inaccurate, it's going to interfere because you're going to try to build knowledge based on an unstable scaffolding. So the prior knowledge is incredibly important. And I'm going to share with you two quotes. One is by Daniel Borstein. It's been attributed to other people too, but this one I've sort of tied it back to. The greatest obstacle to discovery or knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And another one, the hardest part of learning something is not embracing a new idea, but letting go of an old one. So, what I have discovered in my years of teaching is that the hardest part of law school is not everything I'm trying to teach them. I am a first-year law professor. I am working on teaching them the basic foundational skills of lawyering using some substantive law. I'm not even really focused on the knowledge, but they need to have some of the knowledge in order to be able to learn and practice the skills. So the hardest part is not learning all of that. The hardest part is letting go. And I did not include the slide, but I probably should have, is that someone once showed me or used the analogy, which has made an indelible impression, of a trapeze. And you have to let go of what you're holding on to in order to reach out and grab the new. And I think that's really important. Anyway, as I was saying a moment ago, two kinds of knowledge. One second, I got to move my chat off my box so it's not going to let me go. Okay, there's the facts and figures. All right. Dealing with incorrect facts and figures is much easier. So I'm going to stop for a second and say, I got Anita, Craig, Julian, and Amla said, I'm probably saying that wrong. I'd love to know what you teach and what your disciplines are. So if you just unmute and share, or
So this is Anita. I am with the STEM Center. So I empower young people, or our goal is to empower young people to become research scientists. So you name it, I teach. I have to make the connections in order to help them make them.
Perfect, right. So, and anyone trying to teach research is going to encounter a whole bunch of knowledge and beliefs about that they're going to have to, when they enter this level of education, revise from prior levels of education. Right. Craig, what about you?
I teach in the English program. I teach mostly first-year writing, but also business writing as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of it has to do with the people unlearning ideas about writing that are counterproductive.
Absolutely. Julian?
I teach our Discovery Technology General Education course, which is just diving into newfound ideas of futuristic technology, emerging technology, and showing students how the technology we currently have in history and currently have in place now will help build a better future and how they can uplift their community using that.
Awesome. And I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly. Is it Amlisette? Well, I'm not getting an unmute there. I apologize if I'm ruining it. But I've gotten a message saying that Amlisette is a data analyst. So we have all kinds of backgrounds, and hopefully what I'm already saying is beginning to sort of resonate of, yeah. I had these issues for years of trying to figure out what the problem was among my students and why they were having disconnects. And having this framework really helped me give words to it and create a way of dealing with it. Definitely still in process. All right, so the first of the two kinds of knowledge are the facts and figures. So in law, students come in thinking that a piece of paper is a contract, or property has to be tangible. It can't be intangible. Or they come in with this notion of criminal law that's based on law and order. And while there is there's some basis of knowledge in that, it's not accurate. And if those are the beliefs you go forward with, you're gonna fall into potholes. That's my favorite expression for students when I teach, is I just tell them that's a pothole. We want to avoid that pothole. So the first one is much easier, because if there's a substantive fact or figure, I can identify it and I can address it. The second is much harder. It's the assumptions, notions, and beliefs. So here are some of the ones that I've encountered. I know how to read cases for law school. I don't need you to explain that to me. I know how to study. How do you think I got to law school? I know how to take an exam. I've been taking exams for years. I know how to do that. I know how to learn. I've been learning for years. I know what I have to do. These are much harder. These create all kinds of challenges because, first of all, they're not always conscious. They're sometimes really subliminal or assumed at a level that people don't even realize they're doing this. And sometimes they hold really tightly to their beliefs. So what I really wanted to talk about, and I hope we can end up with a discussion. I really didn't plan 60 minutes worth of talk. I planned more like 25 minutes worth of talk or 30 minutes worth of talk and the rest for discussion, is talk about what I've been doing about it and hopefully get you to share a whole bunch of new ideas. All right. So the first thing that I have tried to do is be incredibly transparent. What do I mean by that? Well, I told you that one of the beliefs that I discovered law students have when they get to law school is, I know how to read. You don't have to tell me how to read a law school case. I know how to read. And I used to run orientation, and I would get up during orientation and say, okay, this is about how to read cases for law school. And everyone, it's orientation, everyone is incredibly polite and sits there, but in their head, they've got these little bubbles. And I find out about this later on, but they have these little bubbles saying, okay, come on, lady, we know how to read. How do you think we got to law school? Or blah, 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 that's for those people. I know how to read. And so they kind of don't listen. And somewhere around 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks into law school, they say, uh-oh, maybe I didn't know. So in order to try and get them to be more receptive at the outset that maybe there's something different, I've become incredibly more transparent. I start the presentation with, I know you all know how to read. That's how you got here. I'm not talking about how you read in life. I'm going to talk to you today about how you read law cases. And you know what? Law cases are different. Do you know why law cases are different? Because most of you have not spent your career, unless you're doing primary research, which Anita might be. Most of you have spent your educational career reading secondary sources. But law school cases are primary sources. And they take a lot more work because when you read secondary sources, someone has read it and distilled it for you. And when you read law cases, you have to read it and distill it yourself. That's why we brief them, to help you distill all the facts. And so what I'm going to talk to you today is a niche. It's discipline specific. And yes, you know how to read, but we're going to talk about how to adopt this new skill. It still only works some of the time. I'm still having people come weeks later and say, maybe I need to hear that again. But I think I get to a few more people than I used to sooner. Any thoughts or comments on transparency, or do you want to hear them all before you comment?
I think hearing them all,
Okay.
and then we'll do.
My second is I try to use examples. What do I mean by that? I'm in law school and I want them to become lawyers, and that is a transition to a particular discipline with their own eccentric and eclectic governing principles. But sometimes it's hard to get people to recognize that they're bringing assumptions that may not be appropriate for law. So what I often do is I sit down with the student who seems to be holding on to some beliefs, and I try an example. I ask them to tell me something that they were good at before law school. And one time I had a ballet dancer. I said, okay, teach me how to do a plie. And so she said, okay, well, stand up. And I'm going to have to get far enough back so you can see. And you see, you probably can't see my feet. But she says, stand up. Let's see if we can do that for a second. Stand up, put your heels together, and bend. So I put my heels together and I bent. Now, I am not a dancer, but I know that that is not a plie. A plie looks something more like that. Or for my very poor dancing, more like you put your feet together, heels together with your toes out, your knees, and you bend from the knees over the toes. There are motions that go with it too, but that will do for our dance lesson today. So in the moment where I did the plie, that was a bow, not a plie, the student was like, no, no, no. I said, but that's what you told me. Put my heels together and bend. I did. But I had assumptions in my brain and she had assumptions in her brain. And suddenly we could see that our assumptions weren't the same. And that the level of precision that was going to be required and the need to self-assess and think about the assumptions that I'm bringing in was incredibly important. Okay. Another way I work with examples is one of my favorites, and this is a game, so you're all going to have to unmute to play along. It's 2-minute mysteries and situational puzzles. Now, to play 2-minute mysteries and situational puzzles, I am going to present the group with a fact scenario. And this fact scenario has a story behind it. This is not, there's an answer. I am going to take your questions, which can only be yes, no, and try to see if you can figure out what happened. Everyone got it? Okay.
Yes.
The first one. Beulah died in the Appalachians while Craig died at sea. Everyone was much happier about Craig's death. Why? So Amla, I know you're can't unmute, but if you want to type your questions, I will read them and everything else. But anyone else can unmute, and you need to ask me yes and no questions to try and figure out why.
Was it because Craig was mean?
No.
Was Craig an old person? Elderly?
No.
Was he at home? Was that when he died?
No.
Was Craig a fish?
No.
Was Beulah a nice person?
No.
Was Craig serving his country?
No. Who asked if one was a fish?
I did.
Okay. Why'd you ask that question?
Well, so everyone was much happier with Craig's death. He could be a fish that was eaten so that people could live.
Okay, that's interesting. Any other thoughts?
Was Craig a lifeguard?
No. So the goal of this game is to get people to question assumptions. Every time you ask a question, you're checking out an assumption, and my response gives you a yes or no. And when it's no, you have to change your assumptions, but it's really hard to do because something didn't work. I'm sure people would not be happy with your death. So
I couldn't resist.
no, absolutely. So anyone want to think about want to try to break out of their assumptions to other things? Was Craig a serial killer? No. That was the one from Amla who can't unmute. So you want to keep playing for a minute?
Sure. Did Craig die of natural causes?
Yeah.
Did he die at the place where he loved to be?
Irrelevant.
So did Beulah live in the Appalachians?
No.
No.
Did they know each other? Were they related? Did they have the same friends?
No, no, and no. Complex questions.
Was Beulah hiking?
No.
Was Craig Beulah's killer?
No. Interesting. When you're ready for me to give you the answer, let me know.
I think we're ready.
Yeah, I think we're
I was in
ready.
the bathroom for part of this, so I don't know if this was mentioned, but was Craig suffering before?
No, but interesting. So what if I tell you you're all making a foundational assumption that Dominique came the closest to avoiding?
Yeah, like first would be to think that they are human. Both of them.
Yes.
We are assuming that both of them are humans. And then probably that everyone means like the same population for both of them, right?
I like your first assumption that they're human.
Mm-hmm.
Was Craig a shark? Well, you said he wasn't a fish, but was he a shark? Because that's not.
No, I would say that was a fish, yes, but no.
Okay.
Well, were they both animals at all?
They're not animals. They're not animals. You ready?
Yes.
I am.
They're hurricanes.
Mhm.
They're names of hurricanes.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was very good.
And so the assumption suddenly when I use these, and I have a bunch like this, I have one where they are fish. When you do this, the students are suddenly like, I just assumed that without even thinking, and that wasn't even the assumptions I was making, right? That was so base that I didn't even back up to that. And that's my goal, is to get my students to start self-reflecting enough to start identifying the assumptions and notions and beliefs that might be undercutting their efficient and effective learning. So I chose one more. It's probably not as hard, but we'll try this one for a second and then we'll move on to the other things I do. A man sitting on a park bench reads a newspaper article headlined "Death at Sea" and knows a murder has been committed. How?
Was he the perpetrator?
No.
Does the
Was he
newspaper?
investigating the crime?
I'm sorry. Who just asked that one? Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, was he investigating the crime?
No. Dominique, I think you had one.
I was going to say, does the newspaper article have an image attached to it?
It has names, but no image.
Okay.
Name.
Was he related to the person murdered?
No.
Is he assuming that there is a death at sea because it was a murder because of the title?
No. He knows that it's been a murder. Death at sea wouldn't necessarily be a murder. But yeah.
Was
Is
he
he a psychic?
No, interesting. Not a psychic. I love playing this game because I learn all sorts of ways that people are thinking. It's awesome.
What if it is an article about a book?
Interesting.
Is it an article about a book?
No.
Mm-mm.
Sort of like
Yes.
after you phrased it as a question. Thank you.
Was this person at sea as well? I can't think of what you call it.
No.
No.
Is he a journalist?
No. Oh, and someone said, was he a journalist and did he write it him or herself? No. But really interesting. So again, do you see how you're starting to expand what you're thinking about? So this one, the man's the travel agent. He sold one round trip and one way. So he sold a couple, one round trip and one way. And when he saw the name, he's like, huh, that person did not fall overboard. That person was never coming home. It's based on a Hitchcock thing that says if you're going to murder your wife at sea, buy a round trip ticket for both. But again, there are many of these. You can find them on the web. I love this. I always start my classes with these because it gets students thinking about the possibilities. I don't know which Hitchcock movie. I just read that it was based on a Hitchcock thing. So, all right. So the last thing that I wanted to raise as my strategy techniques is formative assessment. Formative assessment is what makes it real to them. Suddenly, if I give them early on in the semester an exam or a mock exam, suddenly they are, oh my, maybe I didn't understand, or maybe I have to change something. And that provides some motivation for them to start exploring the ways that they might be standing in their own way. And I always tell students, I'm not asking you to give up any notion or belief or knowledge you have. I'm just asking you to leave them at the door for my class. Because I would not want to ask anyone to conform in that way. I think that this concept of prior knowledge and assumptions and belief and how we all learn pervades our society in so many ways today with confirmation bias and other issues. But the topic that I was mentioning here is how I use it in the classroom. So just as a quick recap, it's the concept that no one comes as a clean slate. And if the assumption that you walk in with, if the belief or the practice or the notion is inappropriate or inaccurate for the current issue, it's going to make learning harder. So we as people teaching other people in whatever capacity we do that, want to try to figure out what is the prior knowledge they're bringing. And if it's not what we think they need, can we move them to that? Can we suggest that, etc.? Anyway, so I had planned a 30-minute presentation with the intent that when that was done, we could all just chat. So, comments and questions?
I will say, Professor Cohen, like, just to see that you also are using How Learning Works was really just a breath of fresh air. David and I used that as our textbook when we facilitated the teaching assistant course this past fall, and really helping people understanding the foundation of learning. Like, I really like that you are focused on that, because it really is all about what is your foundational approach, and then how do you build upon that to foster the content in which you're trying to learn and the skills you're trying to build.
Well, thank you. It took me a long time to get here. When I first started teaching, okay, so in truth, I've been teaching for half my life, right? I'm 30 years in now. And when I started teaching, again, I had very little guidance, and I was in there trying to teach people the law. And the more I spent doing this, the more I realized that the law is not what's important. The law changes. What's important as I try to welcome people into a discipline is to teach them the skills and the norms and the thinking and the strategies of the discipline. Yeah. And so over the years, I was like, okay, I have to shift what I'm doing. And I also shifted communities. I started out as a woman in a law school that was 3/4 men. And I moved to teaching in a place where the diversity is predominantly women and predominantly minority. And that, to me, is why I teach, because we need to diversify the legal profession. But what will work as a teacher in modeling, which is a very common way for higher education faculty to teach historically, doesn't work as well if you have if you don't have a very homogeneous population, because a heterogeneous population doesn't understand the norms in the same way, because they're not the norms of all different backgrounds. If we all came from the same cookie cutter background, no problem, but we don't. And that is why I've had to spend so much time doing this. Now, I happen to love this. The 2-minute mysteries came to me in a teaching seminar that was done by a guy named Stephen Brookfield up at Columbia one summer, where he was talking about critical thinking and how do you get people to be better critical thinkings. And after we had done some assignments, I looked and said, oh my God, this is the 2-minute mysteries of my youth. And suddenly it became an integral part of my class. And so these are the kinds of things I'd love to hear what this conversation spurred in your brains. So I'm going to sit back and listen. Anita, you have some thoughts?
I will share something. I think we came around the same time. I came to UDC. I hope I don't scare you all. I'm going to turn my camera on. I started UDC in 2010 with the STEM program. I have worked on I retired from the public school side. I started out as a library media specialist. And it really is being able to communicate. I like the 2-minute mysteries, and I used to do creative things to help teachers make connections across the disciplines. Then I thought I wanted to be a principal, but I wanted to intern, and I went to the internship, and I went for the interview, and they asked me to be a principal. So the last 11 years of my life were spent in that spot. And looking at ways to help people make connections, to understand that we're more connected than we know, that even in STEM, there's something for law. Even in STEM, there's something for some of the other subjects that you all named. My desire is to help at the university for us to become more involved so that the research is richer and our students learn a lot more. So I still have that passion for student learning and our students to be successful. I was looking, I call myself writing things down, but just like I said to Debra, you get anxious or nervous when it's time to talk. I think some of the courses that you all named are IGED courses, and I hope to be I am working on a project. I got pulled into a program this past summer with NASA, and NASA would like for people to use their technologies to create businesses. And I look at it as an opportunity for faculty who does research on a regular basis. And the STEM Center actually supplies student researchers to faculty who are involved so that your research can move forward. I think one of the greatest challenges has been for me, this is the faculty's research and you're using the students to help move your research forward. But I think I'm going to do some adapting of the 2-minute mysteries. It won't be that, but it'll be something else that's related that will help make those connections and hopefully get collaboration. It's more difficult at the university level because when you're in a school, you have a meeting every month with that school. Whereas on that university level, you have so many other things going on that you would never have a life. You can never have a life of your own. Let me put it that way.
So
I have enjoyed your workshop.
Thank you so much. I do it at the very beginning because it is a wonderful icebreaker.
Yes.
Right. I mean, the students I do it. I actually don't play the leader. I break them into groups and let them take turns being the leader. So it's just one of the best icebreakers that I've come up with over the years. And it is so relevant. And all of these examples then allow me to refer back. So when we get caught in the discipline and they're getting confused, I can refer them back to say, well, because non-legal examples that they already own and understand can then be transferred to the legal context. And if they understand it in the non-legal context, it's easier for them to transfer the knowledge. Now, that's dangerous because you don't always want them to transfer exactly the same thing, but we work on that. I understand your concern about silos. I think that higher education is very siloed, and I find it very unfortunate, which is why I told David that I really wanted to do this, because I'm interested in teaching and learning. And I would like to find a community here at UDC that wants to periodically talk about things like this, right? Things like how fear and anxiety impacts student learning. What can we do in a non-psychology way, but in a teaching and learning way to help with that? Those are the kinds of things that I think will make me a better teacher and help my students excel. And to be quite honest, UDC Law is an incredibly special place, right? We're affordable legal education. You can get a law degree at UDC paying tuition over 3 years of what you would pay at 1 year at almost any other law school in the DC metro area. And we provide an opportunity for people to succeed and not be the unique person in the room, not feel like they're the token. And that even today is so important. And then we go out and we graduate these lawyers that go out and serve our communities. And we so need that. So to me, anything that helps me become a better teacher, helps my students learn better, I want to soak up like a sponge. Do other people have any thoughts or comments? Craig, I think you said you were in office hours, and is it Dr. How do you pronounce that, please?
Avellaneda.
Avi.
Avellaneda. Yeah, I wanted to share that I am responsible for trying to educate teachers, particularly in the areas of teaching bilingual individuals. And I find it fascinating how people come into the classroom with ideas about what teachers should do. They even repeat certain cliches that I call, where they go like, oh, children are like sponges. And they repeat those things. And even though during the semester we go over science, evidence, new knowledge, whatever we have in the textbook, at the end, when they have to do any kind of test for me, they just repeat the same ideas. And it's like, I feel like they come to my class and they just ignore everything that we study. At the end, they probably go to the classroom and do exactly what they have seen their teachers do. They just do the same and I read in one of the psychology books how teaching is one of those professions where science is the least used. Like if you see doctors, for example, they go to seminars and they learn about a new procedure to operate on someone and they use it, right? But teachers, they go to seminars, they listen to experts on the field, and they go back to their classrooms and do exactly the same. So the problem is that many of them come with those ideas, that prior knowledge that is incorrect, about how people learn. And many of them don't have ideas about how bilingual people learn, what it means to be bilingual, because they are not bilingual themselves. So even though we tell them like, listen, this is what happens when you're trying to teach a bilingual individual, they go back to what they already have. So it's fascinating. So I thank you for that. I feel like I am not alone. And now I feel much like, oh, it happens to people in other fields too.
Totally. I think that's true. I think that our natural inclination is to mimic what we think worked for us. And so people who are successful and become teachers think that their teachers were successful. So there's an instinct to mimic. And there's a fear, which gets back to one of the things Anita and I were talking about before this started. There's a fear of not doing what you think works. And the other thing that I'll say is that my understanding is that when people get stressed or scared or anxious, they revert to what's comfortable and ingrained. There was a study done in the prior knowledge, if you read the chapter in the 7 effective teaching things, where they talk to astronomers who know that everything does not circle around the sun in concentric circles. They know there are different orbits, but even them who have studied, have PhDs, when drawing it quickly, will draw the elementary school incorrect image because it's so ingrained. And so part of my job as a law professor is to encourage the skill of self-reflection. Because in lawyering, you can't wait until you've presented to know if you're good, because then it's too late. You've lost for your client. So my goal is to develop student self-reflection to the point where they know that they have to be honest with themselves, but that they can do that judgments themselves, or at least have that feeling, I need to do something more, or this is not right. I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's not right. And that takes such ingraining and practice because it is going contrary to things that were so embedded in our belief system at a young age. I mean, the number of people who tell students to go out and reread to study, and we know that is not the efficient way to study, is mind-boggling. And I wish everyone were required to read The Science of Learning. I need to read more of it. But as I said, law professors have zero training in the classroom. So you can imagine what goes on in law schools.
But can I just say, not really anybody, unless you did student teaching. My undergraduate major was French, so going to do your student teaching was a part of the program. But in retrospect, and it may, I don't know that it's any different now than it was when I started however many years ago. You put people in the classroom and you're giving them nothing to go on. So just like Debra was saying, you model those teachers that touched your heart, or the ones that helped you learn the most. You wouldn't believe, even in giving students, assigning students to people for research, they don't start them at the beginning. And one of the things I try to articulate is we want them to empower the next group. That's why we say it's your research. You're moving your research forward. If the student finds himself in that research, then that's beautiful. But you're giving them the skills so they can identify themselves.
People tend to teach the way they learn. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. They tend to perpetuate what works for them. Just a total aside, I am not a believer that people only learn by one learning theory, but I am a believer that people have learning preferences, and knowing your learning preference helps you study and assimilate information. But so there's this silly little 17-question test out there called VARK. It rhymes with bark, VARK, that lets you, and they let you answer more than once, but if you truly answer only one answer for each question, you'll get your true preferences. And I do it every semester. I used to do it every semester. I haven't recently, because it reminds me how I learn, so that I can intentionally make sure that I'm using learning styles and learning techniques that don't just cater to me, because not everyone learns the way I do. So I'm a visual learner, and I'll always have flowcharts and slides. But I've been podcasting my class for close to 2 decades now, going back to MP3s when they were new, because some people learn auditorily and like to listen and listen and listen. And I'll never forget the day I was out running and I ran into one of my students also running. He said, "Oh, I'm listening to you." I'm like, "Oh dear God," right? And then there are those that need the experiential learning for the cementing. And then there are those that need the auditory learning, and trying to build in opportunities and encourage them to either figure out what really resonates with them so they can learn that way, teaching them to be very self-reflective learners. Because, particularly in law, I think in any education, but in law, my goal is to create a lifelong learner, because the law is going to constantly change. So my teaching you a law doesn't help you, because that law will change. My job is to teach you how to understand the law and learn the law so that you can go out and learn any law you want. So that's sort of where I am on that. Other thoughts? Craig, are you with students, or can you unmute and share? And Lisette, do you want to share anything in the chat, or Dominique?
This has really been such a great conversation. I think you have hit the nail on the head in so many ways around what the Center for Advancement of Learning does in terms of helping to bridge that gap, and also helping faculty think about creating that inclusive, diverse, equitable environment for the students where they can learn how they best need to learn. So this has been such a great webinar. So thank you, Professor Cohen, for initiating the charge, especially at the beginning of this new school year, to help us really think about how we help our students learn best, and also how we learn from our students as well, because I'm sure that you have many stories of you instituting something that you think will be a hit, and the students coming back and saying, I don't think that really works, sometimes, or this is why I think this should be tweaked. It really just opens, as you said before, the conversation for communication, transparency, and cohesiveness through the collective environment. So thank you.
Well, I hope that this is really just the beginning of developing this community across disciplines here at UDC, because I would really welcome that. I told David I wanted to do this a year ago. It took us a while to get it on. I've been doing little Qualtrics things in the interim, which are helpful, but not where my passion is. So anyone here, feel free to reach out and continue the conversation. My email, I'm going to try to get back to that slide so I can give you that. I'm over in building 52, and I'm here a lot. And this is what I'm passionate about. And this is where I think that we can be better, stronger, faster. So I'm going to let you all get done with lunch and do other things, but feel free to reach out.